Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page, and it's Wednesday morning, February 15th, 2023. Hope everybody's doing well today. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 7, looking at the life of David. We're moving a little slower through the accounts of David's life and time as king, and well, there's a lot connected to it, and we'll kind of notice that today, some things. But we need to take time with David because of his, it's like Paul said in Romans 3, Romans 1:3 rather, that Jesus is the son of David according to the flesh. There's something to that. And so it's important, I think, to pay attention to some of these texts that we are paying attention to. Other things we'll kind of skim over and not pay much attention to, not because they're not important, but just some facts that are recorded for us to realize. All right, who we got today? Lyle, Janie, Anna, Gail, Efren from the Philippines. Good to have you. And we've got some others viewing as well. And of course, we're always cross-posted onto the nearchurches.com Facebook page. If you have any questions or comments on either one of those pages, use the comment section and I will acknowledge them when I see them. All right, so like I said, we're in 2 Samuel chapter 7. I had to raise my volume a little bit. Seemed like it was bouncing a little low over here. 2 Samuel chapter 7. So, significant chapter in the biblical text, and a lot of other biblical texts are connected to 2 Samuel 7, so we'll notice some of that today. Hey, there's Brian. There's Gene. Good to see you guys. We'll just start. You notice here, I've got it up on the screen. That's where I'll start. Now it came to pass when the king was dwelling in his house, and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies all around, that the king said to Nathan the prophet, Nathan obviously is going to play a major role in the life of David, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells inside tent curtains." Of course, that tent of curtains is a reference to the tabernacle that we read about, laid out for us in Exodus, the latter half of the book of Exodus, basically beginning in chapter 25. And so David expresses this desire based on his current blessings. He's sitting in a very nice house, house of cedar, finished out. And the Ark of the Covenant, of course we talked about that with Uzzah, 2 Samuel chapter 6, is in curtains. Good morning, Michelle. So, go and do all that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you. But the Lord has a message. So the Lord communicated with Nathan that night. A couple interesting things here. God, in his communication with Nathan, that Nathan would then relay to David, says, "For I have not dwelt in a house since the time that I brought the children of Israel up from Egypt, even to this day, but have moved about in a tent and in a tabernacle." And of course, when they left Egypt, of course, that's recorded for us in Exodus chapters 12, 13 or so. Well, again, it's not until Exodus 25 and their processes of wanderings and heading towards the promised land that you even have the instructions for the construction of the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, etc. So wherever the children of Israel moved about, he said, I've moved with them. And, you look at what he says here, verse 9. "I've been with you wherever," the Lord speaking about David, "I've cut off all your enemies. I've been with you wherever you've gone, made you great, like the name of the great men who are on the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more." Of course, this is looking forward. We're past this point in time, but looking forward to Jerusalem, looking forward to the promised land, etc. "Nor shall the sons of wickedness oppress them any more as previously, since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused you to rest from all your enemies. Also the Lord tells you that he will make you a house." Now that's an interesting turn, isn't it? 2 Samuel 7 verse 11. David expresses a desire to build God a house, and God in turn says, I'm going to build you a house. Now this is something that we need to pay attention here, because there are several other biblical texts connected to it. So let's read here, and then we'll make these other connections that are so significant. When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you. He will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men, and with the blows of the sons of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. Again, an extremely significant section of Scripture that is connected to so many other parts. So what I want to do is kind of explore that for the next few minutes and talk about this house, this mercy that would not depart from David's lineage, and this house that would be built. So I think the first thing to consider here is the historical setting. David's going to have a son. Solomon's going to become king. I don't think this is talking about Solomon, and I'll show you a couple of reasons why as we go through here. But notice this. When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, and I will establish his kingdom. Well, historically right now, that's exactly what David is doing for himself. And, his reign lasts for 40 years. He's conquering all of his enemies. In fact, as you read on into, and this is one of those sections we'll kind of pass over, we'll mention it, but you read like 2 Samuel chapter 8, 2 Samuel chapter 10, those chapters record further conquests of David as he's again establishing his kingdom. And also the parallel accounts, and there are a lot of other details in 1 Chronicles, but what we're reading here in 2 Samuel 7 is also recorded in 1 Chronicles chapter 17. And then after 1 Chronicles 17, you've got other things that are recorded about the further establishment of David's kingdom, his conquering the lands around him and gaining control of the monarchy, let's say it that way. So 1 Chronicles 17, really through the end of 1 Chronicles chapter 29, gives us all of those details of David further establishing his kingdom, essentially getting things ready for Solomon after David's death. The construction of the preparations for the construction of the temple, the lining out of the Levitical priesthood, gatekeepers, musicians, singers, how they would rotate by course. All of that is laid out for us in 1 Chronicles, really beginning in chapter 18, all the way through the end of that book. So we're not going to go into all of that. That's just for you to know that you do have those parallel accounts and that there is more information in 1 Chronicles on all of that than there is in 2 Samuel. What we're reading here in 2 Samuel 7 is not talking about Solomon. Here's how we know that. Look at verse 13 again. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Okay? You have to ask yourself, how long did Solomon's throne last? The throne of his kingdom. Well, Solomon reigned for 40 years. We know that. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split. Remember, his son Rehoboam became king of southern Israel, and a former servant of his by the name of Jeroboam took the throne of northern Israel. And all of that's recorded in really beginning in about 1 Kings chapter 12, where that division takes place. The first 11 chapters of 1 Kings, are a record essentially of Solomon, the end of David's life, the handing off, if you will, of the kingdom to Solomon. And then chapter 12 of 1 Kings starts with the divided kingdom. Solomon's throne didn't last forever, the physical throne on earth, let's say it that way. So that's one indicator that this prophecy in 2 Samuel 7 is not about Solomon. Verse 14, I will be his father, and he shall be my son. Okay, so here's a question. Is there anybody in Scripture that has ever been identified as God's son? And I'll tell you this, Solomon was never called God's son. But let me show you this passage here. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 5. It says, "For to which of the angels did he ever say," this is speaking of God, "did he ever communicate to an angel, 'You are my son, today I have begotten you'? Well, no. And again, 'I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son.'" The only one that was ever spoken to by God was Jesus Christ. And so when you see that in 2 Samuel 7 and verse 14, you can know who we're dealing with here. "You are my son" is a quote from Psalm chapter 2. "I will be to him a father." Look at that. The reference is to 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 14. "I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son." So really Hebrews 1:5, if you want what's called a one and done argument or text to say that what we're looking at here let me get back to it now, in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 14 is indeed a reference not to Solomon, but to Jesus, it's Hebrews 1:5. So there's that. That's pretty significant, I would say, that you have other biblical texts that verify what's being said here. But then the text goes on. I'm back in 2 Samuel 7 now. "If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men." Well, hey, good morning, Lottie. We know that Jesus never committed iniquity. We know from passages such as Hebrews 4:15 that he was tempted as in all points like as we are, yet he was without sin. But then you think, if this were a reference to Solomon, well, was Solomon ever chastened? Well, he did. Well, let me just show you this real quick. You go to 1 Kings chapter 11, and you just start reading. We're not going to read this whole chapter, but we'll start here. "King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites," people that God said, don't intermarry. Verse 4, 1 Kings 11, "For it was so that when Solomon was old, that his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David." Talks about his idolatry. Notice this, he built high places for idols, for other gods. He sacrificed to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing. And so, all right, you've not kept my statutes, and so I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days. Notice this, 1 Kings 11:12. "I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David. I will tear it out of the hand of your son." Solomon sinned. Solomon departed from God. And God let him know that, obviously. That was communicated to him. So we go back to, let me get back there. 2 Samuel chapter 7. What verse were we in? Verse 14. "If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the blows of the sons of men." But right there in 1 Kings 11, he says, okay, the kingdom's going to be taken from you, but not during your days. Solomon's reign was a reign of peace. And it lasted for 40 years. And again, the statement here is, if he commits iniquity. Well, we know that Solomon did, and that his kingdom reigned, or he reigned as king in his kingdom for 40 years, and it was a kingdom of peace, time of great prosperity. And even there in 1 Kings 11, "I will not do this during your days." It's going to happen after you're dead. Well, was Jesus chastened? I would tell you to read Isaiah chapter 53, and you'll see that he was. Not for his own iniquity. We know that. But he was chastened. He was, in fact, according to Isaiah 53, he was numbered among the transgressors. He was crucified between two thieves. He was looked at on the cross as just a common thief or a common criminal. That was the punishment for common criminals. But anyway, this is not talking about Solomon. That's the point. And notice this verse, "My mercy shall not depart from him as I took it from Saul, whom I had removed from before you." Well, the mercy of God never departed from Jesus, obviously. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. We know David reigned for 40 years. We know Solomon reigned for 40 years. After Solomon, the kingdom split. And the northern kingdom of Israel lasted maybe 250 years. The southern kingdom of Judah lasted approximately 400 years. They didn't last forever. So this passage here in 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 16 has to be talking about something other than Solomon, something other than the physical kingdom of Israel. And we know, in fact, that it is because, again, of other passages. Good morning, Connie. Good to see you. So let's look at those other passages now that help us really understand what exactly we're dealing with here. The first one, to me, that really helps us see, to understand this prophecy is found in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost. And so let me get down here. Acts 2 and verse 29, Peter speaking says, Men and brethren, let me speak freely to you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Now remember what Nathan was told to tell David. When you are dead and when you are sleeping with your fathers, I will set up your kingdom after you. Peter mentions that here in Acts chapter 2. All right. Verse 30, Therefore being a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him, that of the fruit of his body, according to his flesh. All right, so let me read that. So I've got the screen up here in Acts chapter 2. I've got my Bible to 2 Samuel 7. Listen again to 2 Samuel 7 and verse 13. I guess really the end of verse 12. Who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. And he will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. That harmonizes perfectly with what Peter's preaching here. From the fruit of his body according to the flesh. And that's precisely what the prophecy was here in 2 Samuel 7. He's going to proceed from your body. It's going to be a fleshly descendant of you. And then Peter says this, he would raise up the Christ to sit on his throne. He, foreseeing this, spoke concerning the resurrection of the Christ, that his soul was not left in Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. Of course, that's a quote from Psalm chapter 16, as you see there, Isaiah chapter 53. We know what 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 16 means because we have Acts chapter 2. But not only, here's the thing, not only do we have Acts chapter 2, we could also, and I will, scroll over to Acts chapter 13, and let me get down here, Acts 13, beginning in verse 32. Paul preaching, listen to this. We declare to you glad tidings, that promise which was made to the fathers. God has fulfilled this for us their children, in that he has raised up Jesus. As it is also written in the second psalm, You are my son, today have I begotten you. And that he raised him from the dead, no more to return to corruption, he has spoken. I will give to you the sure mercies of David. Okay? We'll notice that here in just a second. Therefore he also says in another psalm, You will not allow your Holy One to see corruption. For David, after he served his own generation by the will of God, fell asleep, was buried with his fathers, and saw corruption. He's talking about the decay of the physical body. And that's what Peter said there in Acts chapter 2. David is with us today. We've got his bones right here. He saw corruption. But he whom God raised up saw no corruption. That's a reference, obviously, to Jesus. Therefore, let it be known to you, brethren, that through this man, Jesus, is preached to you the forgiveness of sins, and by him everyone who believes is justified from all things from which you could not be justified by the law of Moses. So let me do this real quick. Get back here to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 to 16. The only person to whom this could apply, as you're looking at this text, is Jesus. Solomon's kingdom didn't last forever. In this prophecy, you also have a prophecy of the resurrection of Christ. I mean, that's how Peter connects it in Acts chapter 2 on Pentecost. That's how Paul applies it in Acts chapter 13. You have these cross-references that help us understand when David expressed his desire to build the temple, God said, no, you're not going to build the temple, but somebody's coming after you, and he's going to build my house. And his throne's going to last forever. So here's the thing. Here's another important reason to know this. Why is this so important? Who cares? That might be a question that somebody asks. What's the big deal? Well, part of the big deal is if what was said there in Acts chapter 2 has not yet happened, because there are a lot of folks in the religious world who are still waiting for the kingdom of God to be established. Typically, we think about like premillennialism. Jesus is coming back to the earth for 1,000 years. He's going to reign here and he's going to have his kingdom on earth. Well, but Peter said that happened in Acts chapter 2, that Jesus was exalted by the right hand of God to his throne in Acts chapter 2. And then again, a few years later in Acts chapter 13, all of these promises to David have been fulfilled, and they've been fulfilled in Christ. And so many of our religious friends are still looking for it to happen. They're looking for a false hope. That the biblical text tells me Jesus is not coming back to earth to set up a kingdom. He's already over his kingdom. 2 Samuel tells me that would happen. And not only that, okay, so looking at this particular text here, 2 Samuel 7:13, he shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. There is the only passage that refers to a 1,000-year reign of Christ is in Revelation. Is it Revelation 20? Yeah. 20, it's chapter 20, verses 4 through 7. And the text is not even talking about the reign of Christ per se. It's talking about those who reign with Christ. They would reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Okay? That's saying nothing personally about Christ's reign itself, because he was already reigning at that point in time when the book of Revelation was written. The kingdom was already there. It's not something yet future. That's why knowing why 2 Samuel 7 is so important, and that there are multiple biblical texts that refer back to this and state that this promise has already been fulfilled, and that it's not in regard to Solomon. It's in regard to Jesus Christ and his kingdom and his throne. And again, you see it down here in verse 16, that would be established forever, the kingdom, and the throne would be established forever. The kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, is no more. It only lasted a few hundred years. There is another kingdom that's going to last forever. And I mean, there are a lot of Bible verses that deal with that. I think of Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, that kingdom would be established in the days of a certain empire. We're not going to go to Daniel 2 and 7 right now, but the biblical text in multiple places identifies when this would happen prophetically, and that it did happen, like the book of Acts does for us repeatedly. But anyway, you continue going through 2 Samuel chapter 7. If you have any questions or comments about that particular section, by the way, verses 12 to 16, you can let me know. But the rest of the chapter essentially is David giving thanks to God in prayer, obviously. 2 Samuel chapter 8, David further establishes his sovereignty, let's say it that way. Seemed like there was a particular verse that I wanted us to notice here. Yeah, look at 2 Samuel chapter 8 here and verse 7. This is just, part of the text telling us what David was doing. David took the shields of gold that belonged to the servants of Hadadezer. He brought them to Jerusalem. Of course, all this is going to fill the temple eventually, but then you see the end of verse 6 here. The Lord preserved David wherever he went. All of this is part of God's will. This is the man after God's own heart, whom God put over the kingdom once Saul fell. 2 Samuel chapter 9, we're not going to spend a lot of time here. Kind of an interesting chapter, but we've already read about Mephibosheth previously, that David was looking for someone in Saul's family to bless. Well, there's one left, and that's Mephibosheth. Chapter 9 deals with that, how David showed kindness to him, and he basically said, listen, you put him at my table. He was crippled, so David put him at my table. He eats what I eat. And he did that to show, and this really to me shows a lot of the character of David, this one chapter, what kind of a man he was, because this is a direct descendant of Saul, and David's looking for somebody from Saul's lineage that he can show kindness to, and Saul's the guy that tried to kill him, how many times? 4, 5, 6 times. Just a constant pursuit that lasted for years. And even after his death, David's wanting to bless the house of Saul. It kind of shows you the type of individual that he is. But that's 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 10, again, here just the chapter heading, the Ammonites and Syrians defeated. So it records his further conquests, and then you get to chapter 11, and we're not even going to start there today. David, Bathsheba, and Uriah. It's interesting. We've looked at several things so far, good things that are said about David. And like I said, the book of 1 Chronicles, really beginning there in chapters, again, 1 Chronicles 17 is parallel with 2 Samuel 7. And from all of that text, you have all the good things that David is doing, in essence. Establishing the kingdom, lining things out for Solomon, getting things prepared for the temple, getting things prepared ultimately for the worship of God through the Levitical priesthood. He's lining all of this out. And what's the one thing that we remember about David, typically? Bathsheba. So, like I said, I don't even want to start here today. We'll come back to that, hopefully, on Monday. So that's it for today, guys. A little bit shorter today. That's okay. Appreciate you being on here. Last stream of the week, since it is Wednesday. We're going to be going live tonight at Mammoth Spring. If you're somewhere that you're not able to get out or you don't have Wednesday night services, we'll be meeting at 7 Central. And we're going to be looking at Psalms 55 through 59 tonight on in our adult Bible class. So, guys, I appreciate it. And, hope to see you back here Monday. And we'll look at 2 Samuel probably chapters 11 and 12. But there's a lot to discuss there. Thanks, Connie. Hope you have a good weekend, too. Everybody have a good day, and we'll see you back here on Monday.